saying aloha as a greeting, what you're really saying is that we are joined. I'm acknowledging the life-giving breath, the spirit that is you, that comes from the divine, is shared between us. Your air is my air, and therefore I will not damage your air, for damaging your air damages mine. And so oddly enough, when I'm feeding you, I'm feeding myself, because you're no longer taking from me or others, which requires me to give more than I have. Or at least it feels that way when we're operating from scarcity and fear. Courageous doesn't mean there's an absence of fear. It's an acknowledgement of fear, but still having the ability to move through it. See, in our ancestral mindset, there's only two kinds of fears. All the phobias in the world, but there's only two fears. And the fear is the fear of losing and the fear of not having. So if you're connected to source, you have everything you ever need, and therefore you can't lose it.
Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode of Soul Podcast. I am deeply honored to be joined by Kumu Ramsay today. We're going to talk about resilience, about alignment, restoration, reverence, all things that I love to talk about. And Kumu is an Indigenous wisdom keeper and systems strategist whose work bridges ancestral knowledge with modern infrastructures. He advocates for a shift from extractive economics to relational design, where reverence replaces reference, and return is measured in intellect, intention, and integrity. Through the living principles of Aloha, he guides communities and institutions towards accountable, sustainable, and spiritually coherent transformation. Deeply honored to be in conversation with you today, Kumu. Thank you for joining us.
The honor is mine and the privilege. Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. I may have to borrow that from you sometime.
Well, you know, we're also mutual martial artists.
This is true.
Warrior yoga, and so we have that in common as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would love to start with Aloha. And I think not too many people really know the meaning behind Aloha and how it's more than a greeting.
Yes.
And how do you think about Aloha in terms of where it is that we need to go as a species?
I appreciate that question. Thank you. So with that reciprocity, aloha to you. Right?
Aloha.
Because aloha is reciprocal. It's a reciprocity agreement. As you've already pointed out, it's not just a greeting. So when you're saying aloha to someone as a greeting, what you're really saying is that we are joined. I'm acknowledging the divine spark identity in you. And that the life-giving breath, the spirit that is you, that comes from the divine, is shared between us. And the utterance of the word draws upon the spiritual elemental language of Hawaii. So just in the phrasing of that, aloha, alo means to be face to face, to be joined, to be connected. And when you're expressing that, it's more than just a greeting. It's a declaration. It's a greeting that says, your air is my air, and therefore I will not damage your air, for damaging your air damages mine. And for the time that we're together, 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 millennia, you can trust me and I can trust you. They were creating a space between us that acknowledges not the personality, the name that's given to the spirit, but the true spirit and source that we come from. So it's a deep commitment to say that I will not damage this air, which means I will not damage you. And aloha is a principle that says, leave a place, a person, yourself, whole, full, complete. To leave someone whole, not in one. right?
I love that. To leave someone whole, but not in one.
Not in one, right? And to leave the places that we visit better than when we found them. And as a result, receiving the benefit of being better ourselves. And so aloha is a way of being and not just a greeting. So we say if you can't say that with that commitment, then just say hi or hello. Those are greetings that have no commitment other than to say, I'm here, right? I see you. And maybe not even that. But aloha is really saying not only I see you, but I sense you, right? Because we are inside the same space. And everything else comes from it from that point forward.
Yeah. And it seems like to me in these chaotic times that the essence of what you're speaking to with aloha, much of that has been lost. That commitment to one another and to the planet. It seems to have turned more into my needs and this very individualized outlook on the world, where even empathy in some circles is being positioned as being a weakness.
Yes.
And I'm curious, when you think about this deep commitment to relationship, really,
Right.
how can we do better in that regard?
Well, Chris, I think it's acknowledging what you just said first, is that we have, in recent times, the last 100 years maybe, been brought up in and trained to comply with a system of me rather than a system of we. Aloha is a spirit, a way of being that is reminiscent of a time when it was we, a community, where my benefits were enjoyed because of the benefits of others. That when the community was whole, when my environment was whole, I would benefit from that. Therefore, it was incumbent upon me to make sure that the we was healthy. Because as there was communal health, there would be individual health, because I was an intimate part of that community. But it seems that we've taught ourselves or developed systems where we honor the individual for their individual accomplishments. And we encourage people to do their growth and their becoming to be acknowledged for their individual work rather than their communal work. So to reward individuals for what they've done for others, not just for themselves. And we can see that in just the grading system in school. A colleague of mine talks about when he was in school and reached over to help one of his classmates with their test. And the teacher came over and said, "You can't do that, that's cheating." He said, "But she needs help. She's my friend, she's my relative. I'm just helping her." No, that's cheating. You see?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
In a community where you raise everyone, you don't step in front of them, right? You move together. And so we've ingrained that now, just even in the school system. And then when you get to work, right, we can see that in the compensation plans where a CEO or head of an organization is making 100 times more than the next person who's doing all the work for it. And that leader, as good as they may be, not taking anything away from them, but at some point in time, their compensation package is based on me, not on we. And so we've created a system where the bookends rely heavily on how well you do for yourself. And the other part of it is it becomes transactional. even in our daily experiences with one another. I called you 12 times and you didn't call me back. Or I've done this for you numerous times and I've never received anything back.
Mm.
When we do something with an expectation of that versus giving, extending because I have capacity and there's a need for it, acknowledging that someplace, somewhere, that energy will be reciprocated. Maybe not from the individual, from that place, but I've now put into motion an energy, right? A spirit that will reciprocate at some point in time. Because the extension and intention is to leave the we whole, not the me whole.
Mm.
So it's I would say we've gone to a very transactional way of being rather than a relational one. Yeah.
There's trust involved with that, right? And faith in what you're talking about there is the transaction between one component and the other component, instead of thinking about the whole system and how the whole system moves and how that return, this circulation that can happen when you're truly in community. You can't anticipate how it returns sometimes, right? It's magical. It has its own intelligence. And so it seems like to me in capitalism, especially, that that's the definition of capitalism, right? It's transactions.
Right.
And that there's a new way that's wanting to be birthed. And I'm curious to hear from you as we move through this great change where many different things are happening at once.
Yes.
Technology, we have planetary impact from our species. And you mentioned something that stuck with me in regards to that, that we can't control nature, of course, but we can control ourselves. I would love to hear more from you about that. How can we do better in relation to the planet that we all inhabit together?
Right. Well, it's odd we're talking about this now. Maybe it's not, because all things are connected. But we just experienced what they're calling a 100-year storm in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's been following or paying attention, we had biblical rains, flooding in places that haven't flooded like this in, who knows, maybe never. Winds coming from different directions, and water is coming to wave height, not just a trickle, not just a stream overrunning. So despite the fact that we say, we can't control nature, we're trying. And I can only suspect that this trying has led to this kind of imbalance, if you would. But I think when it comes down to behavior, right? Yeah, we can control ourselves. I can't control others. We can try. But that gets to the point of manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a difference between influencing, inspiring, and manipulating. And you might even say it's on the same spectrum, right? So less manipulation, more manipulation. Inspiration, less inspiration. But if you look at it from that standpoint, at what point in time are we freely engaging in a relationship because we know the reciprocal expression and sharing is mutually beneficial? Rather than I do this for you, for you do this to me, that's an intention, right? That is at the sub-level, still transactional, right? So I'm going to feed you because you need to be fed. We all need to be fed. I'm not expecting you to feed me back. But feeding happens at all levels, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And if I can provide you with the necessary nutrition for you to be whole, then you can create a space in your life that creates wholeness for others, which ultimately will include me, right? And so oddly enough, when I'm feeding you, I'm feeding myself because you're no longer taking from me or others, which requires me to give more than I have, right? At least it feels that way when we're operating from scarcity and fear. So I think that's a reflection of that. What is our focus on? Whereas Native and Indigenous people who live in places in communion with their spaces, we're really operating from abundance, right? When you're connected to source, how can there be anything but abundance if it's source at its fullest definition?
Yeah.
So I think what we're talking about is a disconnection from source, right? And the practices and the principles and the behaviors and rituals, if you would, the protocols that allows us to recognize source and to be resource, which interesting enough is the term that they have for those of us that do this work in Hawaii, the Kumu, that's a resource. And to take that seriously, right? As if we're connected to an abundance of knowledge, wisdom, and information. It's not ours, mine, but ours collectively. So I think
many things there that I want to double click on. Yeah, what came to mind for me is service. And for me, service, the idea of service has shifted so much from even a few years ago, because what you're speaking to is so powerful that when you are connected to source, when you are in your heart space, there is a natural state of being that is abundant. It's not seeking abundance, it is abundant. And then, like you were saying, the act of being in service is serving yourself because you know that everything's connected. You know this. It moves from this belief to a knowing. And then it just makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you be in service where you have the capacity and the ability to do that?
that's right.
And so it makes me think about how we're operating in some ways in the world right now, which is a withdrawal of service to bring, whether it's nation states or otherwise, that we're going to just take care of our own. But it doesn't work like that. Right. Because when one is uplifted, all are uplifted.
That's correct.
And I think that's such a powerful remembering that you talked a lot about, we've talked about before, remembering as a way to recreate. I would love to hear more from you about that. How can we recreate from here? What could be created?
Well, so much of our lives today are around recreation. Same word. But an emphasis on having fun, right? Or entertainment and getting away. But really, it's the deeper understanding is it's being recreative. So getting away from the everyday left, right, to step back into a recreation or recreative mindset, to put it down for a second and allow things to flow again so that you can be creative. So it comes through you rather than from you. And I think we've reached the point where we think it comes from us. We have to do something. And that we have separated ourselves from source so that what we're creating is us. And not really giving full credit to where that creative energy, thought, inspiration actually comes from, right? So once it becomes me, once again, then I'm actually cutting myself off from it. And so all of a sudden there's emptiness because I've just dumped everything. And then we get fearful. I can't give everything because if I do, I won't have anything. And then the reverse happens. It becomes a vacuum. I start sucking everything in and holding it back. And in the fiscal world, they call that savings. What have you set aside? What have you saved for later? For when that day happens when there's not enough. See, so we've already seeded the thought of savings with not having. And so that breaks the flow. instead of what's coming through to continue and grow everything else, I'm going to redirect some of that. And when I redirect that, and if we all redirect that, what's happening, what's actually flowing, much less than was naturally flowing. Yeah. So we've adopted practices and principles that are presented as being proactive, right? Be proactive for when the day you don't have any, put it aside. Rather than being proactive is saying, imagine it continues to flow because we're all flowing.
Ooh, yeah.
You see? Because if I keep flowing, then no one was ever without, including me, because the next guy's doing the same thing. But with I withhold enough for me, which means not everyone is getting enough. And that may be because we don't live in a world with the principle of what's enough.
Interesting. What is enough?
Or do I need more? Right? So more is better rather than enough is just right. See, there is that. And sometimes less is more. But we have
I think we've all seen how people with great wealth, that we know, we hear this, right? That it doesn't necessarily bring, and it quite often does not bring fulfillment.
No.
And so that's such an interesting question to sit with, is what is enough?
Yeah. Well, I kind of play around with it. I look at words and how we use them and meaning versus mechanics.
Yeah.
Someone with 9 zeros or 12 zeros, or a number of zeros behind that number 1. Last I knew, 0 was nothing. So they have a lot of more nothing than I do.
I love that.
And therefore, they have a lot more to lose than I do.
Right.
And
yeah.
you
And that
become very protective of what you have because you don't want to lose it.
Yep.
So it's an odd dynamic, right?
It's very odd.
And interesting, the people that seem to have less are the ones that give more to their communities, because they understand the dynamics of what it is to have nothing and yet have everything, right? So it depends on what enough means to you, I guess. So just an observation.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and enough, we instantly go to monetarily.
Yes.
But what's enough for you in your relationships, in your community, in your housing, in your access to nature? And it's a bigger question to sit with. I will definitely sit with that. And I have noticed, with people who do have a lot of those zeros, one of the things that tends to happen is that grasping, this fear of losing, which becomes weirdly more prominent when you have more, I've noticed. And I really love you bringing it back to, well, if it's flowing, and if you have that natural flow through, then you don't have to hold on to it so tightly. It becomes much more flexible and resilient. I would love to ask you about Ho'oponopono. Your teachings around that have been very transformational for many, myself included. And I would love for you to share your lineage, really, of that wisdom, and maybe help people better understand what it really means, the depths of it.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for that. It comes back to family. It comes back to relations and respect. And I was very fortunate to be mentored by numerous elders in the Hawaiian community. But I have to say, because while I didn't know it at the time, I was in service, as was our custom, is our custom, to be in service to your elders. Not just to respect your elders, but to be in service, to assist them, make yourself available. It's kind of like the universe. Just let the universe know you're available. And as a result, the reciprocity agreement, the Aloha, was exchanged. That was the currency. And so as I provided energy to support their energy, they reciprocated with wisdom, training, education, and aloha. Again, it wasn't a planned thing. I'm going to sit with Auntie and see what she gives me, right?
Yeah.
So the practice of Ho'oponopono, as well as Lua, they're opposite sides of the same coin, are really about alignment. And these individuals were very well aligned, based on their careers, their paths in multiple worlds, not just the Hawaiian cultural world, but in the customary world, the Western world, if you would. So, Auntie Pilahi Paki and Auntie Morna Nalamaku Simeona, and I refer to them as Auntie because they were like my grandmothers who were close to me. And at some point in time, they shared this wisdom with me, as did other elders. But the Ho'oponopono practice in particular was really about peacemaking. It's forgiveness, but it's about peacemaking. It's about putting things into proper alignment. And so when we're in a situation where we're misaligned, we're not aligned with one another in thought, in emotion, and expression of our aspirations, misalignment, that's when we go to war, the ultimate misalignment. And so the process of Ho'oponopono is being able to find alignment before you have to be at war. To a certain
Which
degree,
we could really use that now.
absolutely. But to some degree, some people see that that's the final Ho'oponopono. It has to completely break down before we can rebuild it. And unfortunately, that seems to be the message today. Let's destroy a city of people so that we can rebuild them.
Yeah.
Right? The cost is to them, the benefit is to us as we rebuild, right? Do they really benefit from us, or are we the ones? That's the paradigm they're in, right? It's very different if I'm sitting here and I come across your home that has been destroyed and I bring my resources to help you rebuild. But when I am contributing to the destruction of your home and to say I'm going to come back and rebuild, that's a little disingenuous, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So to dig a hole for someone to fall in so that you can get them as a patient to repair their leg, that's not
It's a racket.
It's a racket, right? So Ho'oponopono is acknowledging and recognizing at some point in time, I'm contributing, I have contributed to the digging of hole and the destruction of homes. Because I'm seeing that. I'm being shown that. And once it becomes part of my reality, meaning in my sphere, then I can now do something to acknowledge my contribution to that and restore balance, because I'm feeling that imbalance. Right? And someone who does not feel that imbalance is really part of the problem. Right? Because I'm not moved by that. I don't see any problem with that.
And the people who can't feel the imbalance, the reason they can't feel the imbalance is because of their own disconnect from source. Is that how you think of it?
That's correct. At some point in time, there's a disconnect to the point where it's only about me. Because I can't sense the pain, the sorrow, whatever it is you're experiencing. Which means I'm probably cut off from that myself, or so deep in pain, so deep in sorrow, so deep in trauma that I won't allow that to surface within me, even if I see it in you. Because in order for me to feel that from you, I must feel it within me. And I've done everything possible to keep that out of my life, because it's been multiple generations of this, and I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to overcome all of that. So to a certain degree, they've completely turned themselves off from that, right? Because I can no longer have the compassion or the sense of understanding what pain or discomfort you're going through. I don't have to own it, but can I at least have the compassion for it? But if I can't even have that sense, then something I've done to really turn that off, which means I've also turned off a lot of other feelings as well.
Mm-hmm.
The true love of what it is to feel that. What is that really? Because now it's becoming an externality, not an internal experience. And so I can play the role. I can do all the external stuff that shows, I'm being a friendly guy. Hi, how are you? Shake your hand. But it that surface only. It doesn't go any further than that. And I think we're seeing that, right? I mean, for people to applaud the destruction of a boat, for people to applaud and say, yay, look at that school we just took out. Yay, our technology works. Did you see that? We got it within 3 meters. Wow.
Oh, gosh.
And we're 100 miles away. And I was able to put the X in it. And we have war rooms, people cheering, watching others being destroyed. That's a disconnect. I'm sorry. Yeah,
That's a huge disconnect. Yeah.
Enemies are enemies, you want to call them. But they're somebody's son. They're somebody's daughter. They're somebody's family.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going to tell me, well, they're attacking you, Kumu. I said, true, but why are they attacking me? Where's the disconnect? What has created a situation that someone I don't know on that little screen, that I'm going to send some multi-billion-dollar technology to take them off the planet because we don't see eye to eye? We don't even see one another. How can I even have that judgment about what, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how far disconnected we become. Mm-hmm. So the process of Ho'oponopono really is about what is it in me that's allowing me to sense this fear, this disconnection, and how do I get back to that sense? And that's not taking it away from you. It doesn't take your pain or discomfort. It acknowledges that and says that whatever I have done to contribute to what you're experiencing to show me now, that's what I apologize for. That's what I've realized I've contributed to your discomfort enough that you can show it to me. And that's where the process is. The process really starts with each and every one of us. So it is about peacemaking, internal peace.
Mm-hmm. It all starts within. And there's a degree of responsibility that is involved in Ho'oponopono. And I think that can be crunchy and daunting for people to take that responsibility because we, especially with the ego, who loves to find hierarchy,
right,
that would rather not, right? And so there's a courage that's required with this taking of responsibility that is Ho'oponopono.
Yes.
How can we be more courageous?
Well, if we understand what courageous means, we apply it to the opposite of fear, right? Courageous doesn't mean there's an absence of fear. It's an acknowledgement of fear, but still having the ability to move through it. So if we aren't there, then where are we? We're living in fear again. Right? So if I can get past the fear of you hurting me, if I can get past the fear of you having more than me, if you have past the fear that I don't have and I will lose. See, in our ancestral mindset, there's only 2 kinds of fears. All the phobias in the world, but there's only 2 fears. And the fear is the fear of losing and the fear of not having. So if you're connected to source, you have everything you ever need, and therefore you can't lose it. Right? So if you're operating in the physical sense and you're not connected to source, then that's a real fear. But if you're really connected to source, you realize I can't lose something I don't have. And I have everything I need. And if I ever need it, I can ask for it. Therefore, I shouldn't be in fear. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that fear is the opposite side of faith. It's the same definition. Believing in something that really has no evidence of being true. Right?
That is my favorite definition of fear. That's great.
So there's no evidence of it being true, but that's faith too.
Mm-hmm.
So the real question on the spectrum of faith or less faith, which we would call fear, or is it fear with less fear, which is faith? It's a matter of what side of the coin you want to focus on. The side of faith or the side of fear. I'm going to place my bets on faith. Right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
So when you think about it, I know people who are afraid of dogs. And when I ask them, there's no reason for it. They just, because a dog will bite me. Well, has a dog ever bit you? No. So where does that come from? So your faith in that outcome has created this fear of dogs. You're so faithful that the dog's going to bite you. That you don't have dogs. You don't even like hot dogs. Right? So, I mean, we extend it so much in our life. But fundamentally, that fear is founded in a extreme faith in the negative happening. So now the question is, where do you place your faith? If that makes any sense.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Profoundly sensible.
And by the way, we learn that. We just don't come across it. We learn that. Yeah.
That's something interesting too, is the nature of education.
Correct.
These days. You're speaking of being available to these wisdom keepers. It reminded me of me, different, but just sneaking around my sensei's studio before I started martial arts. And we would clean the floors just to be in the presence of this knowledge. And there was so much reciprocity between the martial arts family that I grew to deeply respect and love. But it's such a good point about the faith and fear as well. When I was severely ill and almost died in 2020, that was my very simple mantra that I came back to. It was faith over fear, faith over fear. Right. And it was simple enough that I could come back to it and it would be right at the forefront of my mind when all of that confusion and chaos, physically, mentally, emotionally, would start to swirl. Is that the faith over the fear? Because it really tests the mind. When you're in that kind of constriction, the biologics, especially of you, it wants you to go into the fear. It wants to predict. It wants to go into the known. It wants to figure it out.
Right. And
the faith part allowed me to surrender. And then the interesting, magical thing being, as soon as I stopped the fighting and the figuring it out of it all, amazing things emerged from that surrender, which I think goes hand in hand with faith. Kumu, this has been so profoundly inspiring for me. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that's top of mind for you?
Well, I think it's, as you started, we're in a time of uncertainty. But I like to ask folks to think about, when was it ever that certain? We're never promised another day, right? But if we're in alignment, things seem to be working out. So we don't recognize the uncertainty that someone else is, but because there's a pattern. And I like to suggest that if we look at the uncertainty as really the test of the life that we said we want to live, see? Because otherwise, life could be very boring. We're just doing the same thing over again, right? Over and over and over because it's peaceful. Well, the uncertainty is actually the test, right? That's when you really find out that you're alive. You're just not a robot going through the thing the same day, every day, every day, every day, right? And looking for joy in the repetitiveness of things, right? And saying, I'm so happy that, the sun came up again. Yeah. But what did you do with it? Right? I went to the park. I did. But if we keep doing that over and over and over again, now some people find joy in that. I'm not here to take that away from them. But I like to suggest that as the human spirit, evolving, learning, growing, right? That uncertainty is that thing that tests us, that challenges us to become that higher being. That's the evolutionary process, right? Because I think evolution happened not in peace, but in challenging times. We grew taller, we grew smaller, we got larger, we got, whatever it is. It wasn't because everything was peaceful, right? Something challenged us. And the very fact that we have gravity pulling and pushing on us, if it weren't for that, we would be compressed, right? So I think it's that shifting our worldview of what opportunity looks like. And oftentimes it doesn't come when you're happiest. Right? And the uncertainty is really the sense of accomplishment. Now, I'm not saying go look for uncertainty and look for turmoil. But when it's in your face, how do you reframe that? How do you begin to look at it? Okay, so what can I learn from this? What am I being challenged to do? Because everything I thought I knew is now gone. So now I have to do something different. I think that's the human spirit being called out.
I love that. And the uncertainty is from where we create something new. Without that, we wouldn't be able to create. So it's necessary. It's the yin and the yin and the yang.
Right.
We have to have both.
Right. And
such an opportunity.
Again, uncertain, uncurtain. Right. It's pull the curtain back. Right. Take a look at what's really there, rather than assuming that what we see in front of the curtain is really what's behind the curtain. And I think sometimes that's what happens. We just have to pull the curtain back. And I think that's what divinity does. That's what nature does every now and then. It wakes us up. We just had this storm I talked about in Kailo, in Hawaii. And I can guarantee you, thousands of people are now looking at a new day. Right? It's going to be challenging. But they too, we as a community will come together as they are now to restore, to rebuild, not just communities, but self. They're finding out about themselves and what we are as a community. And it is these pivots, these little things that reinforces that. We say we're community, well, let's find out. Right? The hero's journey.
Yes, the hero's journey. And our thoughts are truly with the people in those communities and with you and with Hawaii. So at the end here, I would love to ask you a few rapid fire questions that we ask all of our guests. Are you ready?
All right, go ahead.
What is one belief that you've held that you no longer hold?
That's interesting because I tend to let it go all the time. I think it's the idea that everything is the same, right? And that if I do this today, it's going to be this tomorrow. I think it's acknowledging that there is what we call pono, everything moment by moment. And that what I did yesterday isn't what I'm going to do tomorrow. And if I do, I'm really out of sync. Right? And I think this idea of resiliency versus being permanency versus resiliency. I don't think there's anything permanent other than the need to be resilient. That what's permanent is change. Yeah. So I think understanding those concepts. So I think releasing
Beautiful.
that it's always going to be the same.
And what is consciousness to you?
Consciousness, so many different things. I don't know that there's a word that captures it. I think it's an experience. Consciousness is a sensing, right? It's a communion. We call it awareness, but awareness doesn't equate action. I can be aware of something, but not be active. So I think consciousness is being responsive, right? Because you hear, feel, sense, and you then behave accordingly. There's a consciousness to that. And it's not just a thought. There are
Right.
things we do without thinking. In fact, many of us speak without thinking. Right? But to be able to do and respond in a way that is in alignment, which is an attunement. So I think consciousness is measured by attunement. Right?
I love that. That's beautiful. And what is source, God, or oneness to you?
You, all of us.
Aloha.
Aloha. It really is. And I think there are brands of God, brands of source, right? But source is source, regardless of how it may enter the space. And I think it's acknowledging that regardless of what the packaging is, the contents are still from source, right? As far as the human experience is concerned, and animal world and nature. The tree is source, right? The animals that live in the tree are source. You and I sitting under the tree, benefiting from the animals and the fruits from the tree are source. Yeah. And not get caught up in the branding, right?
I like that's really an interesting perspective.
It comes
Not
from
get
the
caught
ocean.
up in the branding.
Yeah, it comes from the ocean, comes from the mountain, comes from the air. But it's kind of like Procter and Gamble has 4 different kinds of dish soaps or laundry soaps, depending on what smell you like. It all comes from Procter and Gamble. So I would suggest that the real source has many more products than Procter and Gamble.
Yeah.
And don't get caught up in the branding.
I love that.
And acknowledge source. So I think God, that name that we've given, if it really is that, then I would fall very short of trying to describe it.
And if it were 100 years in the future on planet Earth, what would you hope for humanity?
Well, I would hope that we'd be right in right relation again with one another and our planet. And equally important, that humanity would be overcoming humanity. Because there is an inhumanity, an inhumane way of being that is part of our humanity. It's part of our growing, right? And I think the concept of the human is that we will realize our true spiritual nature and have overcome this dimensional limitation called the physical. And that we will actually transcend that 100 years or less.
Or less.
But I think that would
Yeah.
be logical, because it would then mean that there is no separation between me and that tree. Or the rocks, or my fellow relatives, which we call resources, right? So that would be my hope. That would be my wish, that at some point all of us would transcend this sense of the physical that we're in. Because I think so much of the turmoil that we feel and experience is tied to that. The benefits.
I agree.
The benefits, but also the discomforts. But that's why we're here, as sensual beings, to experience those things.
Becoming interdimensional.
Interdimensional, right.
Beautiful. Well, Kumu, thank you deeply, so much for your time, your wisdom, and your transmission. And if people want to work with you deeper, how can they find you?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have a daughter that's done some social media for me. So
she's great.
you can find me on Instagram as Ramsey Tom, or Facebook as Kumu Ramsay. That's probably the places that she's got me up right now. There's different places, LinkedIn and all that other kind of stuff. But and then most recently, and at various events, physical events. I'm right here. I'm in California right now at a very big event going on. And in several weeks, I'll be doing one in Arizona. So if anyone's in Arizona, come and join me. So
And when is that in Arizona?
that's going to be April 3rd through the 5th.
April 3rd through the 5th.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that'll be in Phoenix. And that information is out, and I can share that with you, and you can share it with others.
Perfect. We'll include it.
Yeah, that's
thank you.
Warrior priest. Yeah, so
Warrior priest. Yes.
warrior.
We need that. I love that.
Crystal,
Thank you so much, Kumu. This has been delightful. I really appreciate you.
likewise. Be well.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul-nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.